Yes. Many thanks to our jazz ensemble, to our choir. Yes. To all the musicians among us. Good morning and welcome to worship. Oh, good morning. And welcome to worship here at the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock. I'm the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore, and I'm a minister here at this congregation along with, is everybody okay? Along with the Reverend David Carl Olson and the Reverend Jay Brooks. In this congregation, we seek to create loving religious community. We encourage spiritual growth, and we try to build a more just and joyful world. We come together to restore the balance of our spirits. Together, we create the joys of life and celebrate them here together, and we find strength to meet life's sorrows. Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition which embraces the wisdom found in all faith traditions and values diversity. We use science, reason, and the gifts of the Spirit, of which there are many in this room, to explore life's meaning and mystery. We believe that you need not think alike to love alike. So, I want you to visit our website or our welcome desk in the lobby to learn more about this congregation and about Unitarian Universalism. After the service, please join us for coffee hour on Zoom if you're not here in person, or in the social hall if you are here in person. I have a couple of things I'd like to draw your attention to. Please note that the deadline for applications for delegates to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly is February 1st. And hard as it is to believe, it is almost February. So, General Assembly is the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists, our national gathering. And this year it is both online, so you can all participate from the comfort of your homes, or you can go to Pittsburgh and be in person with a whole bunch of Unitarian Universalists, enjoying and exploring Unitarian Universalism and visiting a city that has successfully come back from a really hard time. So please consider coming to General Assembly. Also, in our community today, there is a rally and vigil at 4 p.m. at the Nassau County Courthouse to stand in solidarity with the family of Tyree Nichols. So if you are available, please join. And now, I invite Corrine Hayden.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you. My name is Corrine Hayden, and I'm the chair of the Board of Governors of the Veatch program here at Shelter Rock. The Veatch program is a national philanthropic giving program of our congregation since 1959. We have provided long-term support for social justice organizing throughout the United States. As a leader in progressive philanthropy, we currently fund almost 200 organizations. Veatch Sunday is an annual tradition here at Shelter Rock, and it's a very special day because the congregation has an opportunity to hear from Veatch grantees who are going to speak and show us how their work puts our faith into action. In today's service, you will hear from Dorian Warren, co-president of Community Change, one of our most long-standing grantees. Dorian is one of our country's boldest social justice leaders. He's an esteemed progressive scholar who has taught at the University of Chicago and Columbia University. He has been an MSNBC contributor, host, and executive producer. And he sits on the boards of many organizations working to strengthen our multiracial democracy. He's also a visionary grassroots organizer for over 2 decades. Unfortunately, Dorian is not able to be with us today, so he will not be with us in person, but he will be with us remotely, for which we are very grateful. And we look forward to hearing his words as part of the sermon. Let us open our hearts and our minds in his vision and his hope for justice. Following the service, please join us at noon for a Greek lunch in the social hall that's hosted by the Veatch Board of Governors, and then at 1 p.m., return to the worship room, and we have our Veatch program annual meeting. Afia Atamasa, a colleague from Community Change, will be here with us today. And the conversation about community change and an opportunity for question and answers is going to happen at the annual meeting. So all are welcome, and let us worship together here right now. We'll light the chalice to begin.
Good morning. We light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. This is the faith of the open mind. This is the faith of the loving heart. This is the faith of the helping hands. Together we take care of the earth and work for peace and friendship in our world. Please stand in body or spirit for the words of affirmation, our words of affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, this we do affirm and covenant with each other. Please remain standing and put on your mask to sing our song of affirmation. From all that dwell below the skies, let homes of faith and hope arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land by every tongue. You can be seated.
Good morning. My name is Abby Smith, and this is Sometimes People March by Tessa Allen. Sometimes ants march. Sometimes bands march. Sometimes people march. Marching is something people do together when they want to resist injustice or when they notice the need for change. People march for many reasons. People march for the things they care about and people they love. People march for the health of their bodies and their communities and the world. People march for the freedom to love and live and learn. Sometimes people carry signs to show their stories of resistance. People resist in many ways. Some people resist with their voices. They might resist with words or with songs or art. People resist with meetings. They resist by standing up or sitting down or taking a knee. It isn't always easy. Feet get tired, arms get tired, hearts and hopes get tired. Sometimes problems seem too big or complex. But we do not march alone. Ants are stronger together. Bands are louder together. People are more powerful together. Sometimes from feelings of fear or anger or injustice comes the hope for change. Sometimes great change starts small with a brave question. Maybe your question, a question that calls people together. And together, we find the courage to march. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abby. Now join in singing our children to their religious education program. Please rise in body or spirit and wear a mask to sing hymn number 1021, Lean on Me.
Good morning. I'm Diane Cohen, Vice Chair of the Veatch Board of Governors. Today's collection is for the Women's Diversity Network, a Veatch grantee right here on Long Island. The Women's Diversity Network supports the leadership of women and gender-expansive people to change conditions that cause the unnecessary death of women during childbirth, the rates of which are alarmingly high here on Long Island. This organization was launched in recent years to connect Black women on Long Island to work for reproductive justice. Its members coordinate the Health Equity Alliance, which holds Long Island hospitals accountable for improving the health services offered to low-income women and women of color. Their work truly reflects our UU values. The Women's Diversity Network's name may be familiar to you because the UUCSR Women's Group has supported their efforts. In fact, the UUCSR Women's Group is hosting an event on Black maternal mortality in partnership with the Women's Diversity Network next Sunday, February 5th at 1 p.m. in our art gallery. I encourage you to attend to learn more about this important issue. The Women's Diversity Network raises money through grants and from individual gifts from donors like you. You may make contributions on our website or through PayPal or by text message. If you are on site, the donation box is in the lobby as you leave the worship room. The Women's Diversity Network is working to save women's lives right here on Long Island. Please find it in your hearts to give as generously as you are able. Thank you.
We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started. We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started. Together we'll have victory, hand holding hand, hand holding hand, hand holding hand. Together we'll have victory, hand holding hand, hand holding hand, hand holding hand. Never ever put to flight, we're about to win, we're about to win, we are about to win. Never ever put to flight, we're about to win, we're about to win, we are about to win. We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started. We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started. We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started. We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started.
Let us take a moment, this moment, to open our hearts and minds to the concerns among us. We breathe together. Take a breath deeply. Release your breath slowly, with intention, with thoughtfulness. Find in this moment the power of stillness. Again, our nation is convulsed by mass shootings. The mass shootings in California, which were especially frightening to the Asian American community. There have been 40 mass shootings in the United States during January alone. Again, there is a video of unwarranted, deadly police force against an unarmed Black man. Again, We offer our prayers and actions to those in pain from these events. Our prayers and our actions. May we come to recognize our common humanity and stop this violence. It harms us all. May we work for peace, for justice, for us all. And near to us, we mourn with the family of UUCSR members Roz Levinson, who died on January 23rd. With Lisa Brody, whose father died on January 22nd. With Margarita Gonzalez, whose father died on Friday. May they know the love and care of this community in this difficult time. Our hearts are with them and with all those who sit here today holding grief and sadness, sorrow and loss. What is spoken and unspoken among us. May we always be a comfort to one another. May we find our way to life's spirit and hope, even in times of hurt and pain and despair. For there is spirit and hope. We gather to be a font of hope and care for one another. Blessed be.
Today's reading is taken from Matthew 20, the parable of the workers in the vineyard. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around, and he asked them, "Why have you been standing there all day doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So once those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So, the last will be first, and the first will be last."
Good morning. I'm honored to be part of Veatch Sunday, and I'm devastated that I'm not able to be with you in person. This is the first time I've had COVID, and it's a hard reminder that we are still in a pandemic. It's a hard reminder that the moment in time in which we find ourselves is not normal. But as we've all learned the past 3 years, we can do a lot virtually. And so I want to start by thanking the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock for all the ways that you put your values into action as a faith community, for sponsoring the Unitarian Universalist Veatch program at Shelter Rock, and for providing more than 30 years of support for community change. I want to thank the Veatch Board of Governors for this invitation, and in fact, this is actually the first time I've been called to give a sermon, whether remote or in person, and I really, really hope that you'll have me back when I can actually be there with you. Now, as you gather, the country is reeling from the horrific videos of Tyree Nichols' brutal beating by Memphis police officers. It's a devastating reminder of the jangling discords of our nation, as Dr. King described it to the Unitarian Universalist Association back in 1966. Against this backdrop, and despite the distance this nation has yet to go, I want to speak today about the ways this congregation's generational commitments to social change have bent the moral arc of the universe. Bent the moral arc of the universe. That's actually from Theodore Parker, the great abolitionist and prophetic Unitarian minister. That's how he described his moral vision, his moral center, and it's one that inspired, in fact, Dr. King. It infuses this congregation, and with power from the ground up, it will transform those jangling discords into a beautiful symphony. Now, I grew up in Chicago, son of a school teacher, grandson of janitors whose union jobs with the Service Employees International Union made it possible for my mother, my brother, and me to live the American dream. My great-grandparents fled the Jim Crow South after the first Reconstruction, part of the first wave of the Great Migration to the Promised Land of freedom in the North. During that first period of Reconstruction after the Civil War, a rainbow coalition of poor folks in the South got us close to a multiracial democracy, as close as we had ever come. But every time we make progress toward freedom, every time we make progress towards justice, every time we make progress towards peace, there were always efforts to turn back the clock. So a backlash came in the form of what scholars call racial authoritarianism, and new Jim Crow laws, voter suppression, racial segregation, took over across the old Confederacy. These days, we see the rise of authoritarianism both at home and abroad. My family, in fact, fled to the North a little over 100 years ago to escape the campaign of racial terror that defined the Jim Crow South. We know and we must never forget our true history. Now remember, this democracy that seems so fragile right now is much younger than we'd like to believe. Our multiracial democracy began in 1965, when after a decade of organizing, ordinary people in Selma, Alabama, tried to peacefully march across a bridge, only to be met with violence for the entire world to see. As you heard and read earlier, sometimes people march, and by doing so, they can democratize our democracy. Points of pain are often chances for change, Reverend Jesse Jackson reminds us. Points of pain are often chances for change. The Selma campaign was a tipping point, and 5 months later, with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, black men and black women could exercise their rights as full citizens in this democracy for the first time. Now we can think of that moment in 1965 as part of a second Reconstruction, less than 60 years ago. Community change was born in the last years of that second Reconstruction. And over the past 55 years, we have fought alongside low-income people of color to realize the promise of multiracial democracy. We have fought for the freedom of black people even to breathe, a freedom that remains in question, and we have fought for the freedom ultimately to thrive. But again, there is backlash. Again, there is an effort to turn the clock back. After civil rights, the backlash was less bloody, more insidious though. The backlash was in the pernicious lie that a neoliberal economics designed to wring every ounce of productivity from labor was the only option to structure our society. Bayard Rustin, who organized the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, named in 1965, 2 years after that march, Rustin named the consequences of deindustrialization and automation, and he knew who would be the coal miners' canary: black workers. The economically violent backlash to the Second Reconstruction has become our nation's common sense, just as Jim Crow authoritarianism was the common sense of its day. Now we know, people of faith and people of conscience know, that there is a better way. We know that each of us has a role to play in living out the principles of justice, of equity, and of compassion that Jesus called us to follow. Care for those who hunger and thirst, for the stranger and the prisoner, for those deemed least in our society. That is the story that we must tell, the narrative of abundance and grace, of jubilee. Now, the Reverend Dr. William Barber speaks of a third Reconstruction that would join together poor people of all races to change the economic architecture of this country. The Gospel of Matthew lays it out for us in the parable of the workers in the vineyard that was read earlier. Throughout the day, the landowner goes to bring more and more workers into the vineyard. And even near the end of the day, He went out to find workers, asking them essentially, "Why are you out there in the corner?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. So the landowner puts in the work in the vineyard, some for an hour, and at the end of the day, all the workers receive a full day's wages. Their work did not define their worth. Their worth and dignity was inherent. Their humanity earned them the dignity of a living wage, a guaranteed income, if you will. This is the vision of your own moral center. It's the very first of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalist congregations, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That is the vision of a third Reconstruction, a society that delivers the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all of us, of freedom and justice, without preconditions. Now, I have a little girl, almost 2.5 years old, and the world that I want for my little girl looks very different from the one we walk into every day. Her safety, her ability to live a full, healthy life, those are the things I think about because she is my everything. And I know that all of the parents here know how completely your life changes from the moment your child comes into your life. And I have to say that the worst part of having COVID is the deep fear that I will make her sick. The fear that I can't fully keep her safe. When I think about the horrific shootings in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay, the 6-year-old who shot his teacher in Newport News, the barbarity that killed Tyree Nichols in Memphis, I'm reminded over and over again that our children are not safe in this world. And in fact, my child is less safe than many of yours. On January 10th, 3 days after he was brutally beaten by Memphis police, Tyree Nichols died. He succumbed to his wounds. He had a 4-year-old son. And he died 5 days before we would have celebrated Dr. King's 94th birthday. Dr. King, who was, of course, murdered in Memphis 55 years ago this April while supporting striking sanitation workers, who, yes, were marching to demand recognition of their inherent worth and dignity. The Mennonite theologian, Dr. Ben C. Ohlenberger, wrote, "Victims of crucifixion died of asphyxiation. Jesus might have cried out from the cross, 'I can't breathe.' Yes, Black lives matter. It's a matter for us of loving one another as Christ has loved us, as God so loved the world." End quote. The poet Gwendolyn Brooks wrote that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And I've been thinking about these words this week and the weight of the work ahead of us. They speak to my theology, to Community Change's theology, which is simply community organizing. Community organizing is a practice rooted in our abiding faith in people, and the power of relationship, and the transformative potential of love made active through solidarity. We are each other's magnitude and bond, called to love one another as God so loved the world. The future we can create together reflects the business we make of each other. Together, with a powerful movement powered from the ground up, united behind the last of us who are now first, we can bring about a third Reconstruction in America. 10 years ago, last November, 200 fast food workers in New York City walked off the job to demand $15 an hour and a union. Now, that didn't just happen spontaneously, and $15 an hour was not a foregone conclusion. When workers said they needed 15, I have to tell you, they were laughed out of the room. And I know because I was in the room. The thing that so many people missed about the fight for 15 was that it wasn't primarily a policy fight. It was and still is a fight about the moral center. The fight for 15 was about a different common sense. That as human beings, no matter the nature of your work, you deserve to live with dignity. If you flip burgers, if you scrub toilets, if you care for children or clean hotel rooms, you have value. Your work has value. And if you work in the vineyard for an hour or a day or not at all, you have dignity. You have worth. It is inherent, as Matthew's gospel tells us. The moral center is usually seen as radical at first. And it's seen as radical until it becomes the new common sense. Now, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of Dr. King's disciples, often reminds us of the three questions Dr. King would ask about the moral center. Vanity asked the question, is it popular? Politics asked the question, is it winnable? Morality and conscience asked the question, is it right? Workers organizing for $15 an hour were always right. But 10 years ago, their demand was neither winnable nor popular. That took a movement led by the people most impacted, centering the experiences of those excluded from society's protection, guided by the voices too often silenced and unheard. It took power. And to achieve our vision of economic justice and thriving, even the right to exist in safety as a Black man, that takes a fundamental rebalancing of power in this country. Power to the people. Now, we build that people power through organizing. Organizing builds power through community and social networks. It creates an infrastructure that brings ordinary people together to accomplish shared goals, rooted in what former organizer Barack Obama once called the beauty and strength of everyday people. He wrote that it is through stories and songs of dashed hopes and powers of endurance, of ugliness and strife, subtlety and laughter, that organizers can shape a sense of community. This congregation knows about organizing. And I just have to say that the Unitarian Universalist Veatch program at Shelter Rock is a model for philanthropy. It showcases the kind of steadfast, collaborative funding that you provide for the work of building power from the ground up. More than 20 years ago, our mutual friend Bill Dempsey, who served on the Community Change Action Board of Directors, worked with Margie Fine in the UU Veatch program to make the first grants to grassroots organizing and nonpartisan mobilization in support of LGBTQ equality. The UU Veatch program was first in, convincing far larger donors at the Ford Foundation and elsewhere to support the decades of organizing and hard work that finally established marriage equality, just codified less than 2 months ago with the Respect for Marriage Act. Now, this is the power of organizing and the impact of this congregation's commitments. You asked what was right, you committed to the fight, and you helped to make the moral center the political center. Now, people exercise their power through politics by engaging every day in the project of democracy. And our democracy depends on all of our participation. People struggling to make ends meet, people of color, and people who have been systematically excluded from small d democratic practice. It depends on a process where each of us see ourselves and our interests represented in our democratic institutions, where lies have consequences, and elected leaders feel accountable to the people they represent. Now, I'm not sure if this still holds true in New York's 3rd Congressional District, but I'm going to let y'all figure out the path forward from here. As an organizer, I can't close this morning without asking you to do something. If an organizer asks you to coffee, just know that you're not walking away without getting asked to do something. So first, I ask you to connect. Our democracy depends on each one of us refusing to be silent or complacent or resigned, and instead connecting with each other and with the communities that we call home. Reject the cynicism of horse race politics and a zero-sum story of economic choices. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your family members, ask them about the issues that matter to them, and tell them why democracy matters to you. If each one of us lives our faith and calls others to do the same, we can make sure that each election strengthens our democracy by getting one more person involved. Second, I ask you to recommit and to act. The organizations this congregation supports are on the front lines of the existential threats that this country is facing. We've been making democracy work. We've been building the architecture for a new economy. We've been fighting to bring forth the new world, struggling to be born. And 19 of these groups are right there among you in New York. How else can you, each of you, get involved? Now, my sister, Afia Alaminsa, will be with you for the afternoon meeting, and I'm sure she has some ideas for you on how you can get involved with her former organization, Community Voices Heard, or many of the other 19 organizations right there in New York. Now, I'm reminded of Exodus 14. Exodus 14, when the Lord tells Moses to finish his prayers and to act. We have not yet reached the promised land that my great-grandparents sought. And with every generation, yes, we move a little closer. But if Moses had stopped in the middle of the Red Sea, Pharaoh's army would have overtaken the people fleeing slavery in Egypt, and water would have closed in all around. We must press onward. And as Unitarian principle guides us, we must continue our work to bring about peace, liberty, and justice for all. Last, I ask you to believe. Organizing like faith calls us to believe in things unseen. I ask you to believe in the slow and steady, the hard-to-see work of building community, to believe in the beauty and strength of everyday people, and to act with the knowledge that everything is impossible, as Nelson Mandela said, until it is done. Amen.
I'm sure that, although distant, Dorian can feel your appreciation for his words. Please rise in body or spirit and wear a mask to sing our closing hymn, number 1074, Turn the World Around.
Go back to
sit and remain seated for our closing words as we extinguish the chalice and listen to the postlude, and then there is that Greek lunch you were promised. And so, our closing words are from Conspiracy by Atina O. Danner. What if we decided to breathe together? What if we open the airways? What if we unlock, unbind, unfetter the hands that feed us? The earth, the air, the water that holds us and shapes us were breathing together before we found ourselves existing. And so they will continue after we're gone. Imagine our final goodbye coming later than sooner. Imagine our final breaths in paradise. It's not too late to slow down, fall into the dance, catch the vibrating air, and release our lungs in song. Anything breathing cannot help but breathe, but breathing together is a choice we make.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Schwab. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.